everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am bringing you a video that is quite different from me, mainly because I'm not going to be talking about any specific books today. I'm going to be talking about a particular topic, which is how do I read so much? I have gotten this question so many times on so many of my videos from my subscribers, and so I decided that it was finally time to make a video about it. So first, I thought I would talk about my own personal reading style, and then I would get into tips to help you read more if you want to. So there are some amazing digital resources out there that give you access to a ton of free books. You know, you definitely don't need to be someone like me that spends a lot of money on physical books. There are ways to access books completely for free. Of course, you can go the traditional route of going into your physical library and getting physical copies of books that you want to read, but I find that it is so much easier to just access the apps that libraries use just to get audiobooks and ebooks, because it's quick and easy and free. We love to see that. So the apps that I really love that my public library uses are Hoopla and Libby. I'm going to try to find links for the websites for these apps and things like that. I'll definitely link those down in the description below. Also, I want to mention that there is a video that Jen from the Book Refuge made about the same topic, because she reads a ridiculous amount of books. I think she read at least like 600 books in 2020. So I'll definitely link that video up in the cards above if you want even more tips for reading a lot of books. So I just wanted to get that out of the way in case you are someone that is new to reading for fun and you didn't know that your libraries have these resources. Now, I know that there are some people that live in areas that don't have great public libraries, but especially with COVID and everything, there are quite a few like huge libraries that have made it possible to sign up for a digital library card, so that you don't even need to necessarily live in the city. You can just like go to their website, sign up for a card, and then you can also get access to Hoopla, Libby, apps like that. So yeah, I also use Audible pretty sparingly though, because that's a really expensive app. You know, they charge $14.95 a month for one credit, meaning for one audiobook. I will say that I also like their Plus catalog. That's a new thing from them. Basically, they have this huge catalog of audiobooks that you can access completely for free. You don't need to use a credit or anything like that. Okay, so my personal reading style. This has changed in the last year or so. Basically, before COVID, when I was driving a lot more often and going to work more often, I was usually reading 2 books at a time. Basically, I was listening to an audiobook while driving, but then any other time when I was just sitting at home, I would read a completely different physical book. Now that COVID is a thing and I'm staying home a lot more often, I have a different method of reading that has really been working for me personally. So basically, through using resources like Libby, Hoopla, and Audible sparingly, like I said, I'm able to access pretty much any audiobook I want of any book that I decide to pick up. So in the last year or so, I have started listening to the audiobook while following along with the physical or the ebook format. So there's a few different benefits to this. First of all, the speed at which the audiobook is read to me is faster than the speed in which my mind reads, if that makes sense, because through the last year or so, I've been able to work my way up to listening to audiobooks at 3 times speed when I'm following along with the physical book. And then when I'm not following along with the physical book, aka if I'm driving, cleaning, doing anything like that, I can listen to audiobooks at about 2.5 times speed. One of the things that's great about taking in the story in 2 formats, aka audibly and visually, is that it keeps me at a very consistent reading pace, because when I'm just reading something physically, first of all, I get distracted very, very easily if I am just reading something physically. Like, any noise will distract me. And then it takes me entirely too long to get like re-engaged in the book. So when I am listening to the audiobook, it keeps me engaged. It also really immerses me into the story because I'm taking it in 2 senses. And so what's also great about this reading method is that when I'm not able to follow along with the physical book, if I have to clean, if I have to drive somewhere, so when I'm working out, for me that's doing yoga, basically if I'm doing any kind of task that isn't taking my full attention, I am listening to an audiobook. So because I'm listening to audiobooks at least 2.5 times speed or 3 times speed if I'm following along physically, that's how I'm able to get through books as quickly as I can. At this point, especially in the last couple of months, I've been able to read a book a day. My lifestyle and my reading style may be very different from yours, and that also is a huge part in how I personally read so much. So right now, because of COVID, I don't have a ton of work commitments. I really only go into work a couple times a week, and then I also teach voice lessons virtually. So a lot of the time I'm at home, and really any spare moment I have, I am usually reading. Honestly, like that is most of my life. So that may also be a huge part in why you don't read as much as I do. And also I want to point out that any reading is valid, okay? Just because you're not reading as much as me, or just because I'm not reading as much as somebody else, like that doesn't mean that our reading isn't valid. You know, the number really doesn't matter. Even if you only read like 1 book a year, that's fine. That's still reading. Even if you're someone who only reads Wattpad books, that's fine. That's still reading, you know? Any reading is valid. I definitely wanted to take a moment and point that out to you guys. I definitely don't want to come off as elitist in any kind of way. Also, something I want to point out about my own personal reading is that I don't read just for the numbers. I'm not reading a book a day just to say that I do. I'm truly just so excited about reading all of the books on my massive TBR. So I read books quickly also because of that, because I'm just so excited to get to the next thing, you know? Okay, so that's basically it for my own personal reading style. So now I wanted to get into different tips and tricks that you guys can use to read as many books as you want to, basically. So this is something I already mentioned. I'm also referencing my notes app because I have a ton of notes on this topic. I already mentioned this earlier, but one of the amazing things about listening to audiobooks is that you can listen to them while doing tasks that don't require 100% of your attention, such as doing makeup, skincare, anything like that, brushing your teeth, cleaning, driving. I know a lot of people that listen to audiobooks while playing games on their phone. I personally don't really play games on my phone anymore, so that doesn't really apply to me. Waiting in line. Okay, this is kind of a crazy story. So back in 2019, I went to Disney World and Universal Studios with my mom, but unfortunately for a couple of days, she was very sick. And so I ended up going to Animal Kingdom and Hollywood Studios by myself for one of the days. And so I waited about an hour and a half for one of the Avatar rides. It was the first ride that I went to that day because I knew it was a very popular ride. And so obviously I brought my phone with me, which has my audiobooks, and I brought my headphones with me. And so I listened to 3 hours of an audiobook while waiting in line for that ride, because at that time I was listening to audiobooks at 2 times speed. So yeah, if you're waiting in line for anything, like most of the time it's not going to be as extreme as an hour and a half, but like even if you have a spare few minutes and you're waiting in line, or you're like sitting on the subway or sitting on the bus or something like that, you can definitely get some listening in. Yeah, it's just crazy to think about how much you can read when you're not even like thinking about the fact that you're reading, like you're just listening to something, you know? But here's another few tips that I would consider if I were you in terms of just like picking up more books in general. You know, reading books that I'm excited about for the most part is definitely how I read so much. I already mentioned this earlier in the video, but this kind of goes hand in hand with, you know, don't force yourself to pick up a book just because it's a book that's like widely popular if you know it's a genre you don't like. You know, for instance, like classics don't really appeal to me, so I don't pick them up very often, even though I know that they're very popular books. A lot of them are celebrated and well written and all of that, but I know me personally, I'm not really into that genre. So, you know, I'm not gonna push myself to read those books. You know, a couple of other tips in terms of reading books that you're excited about. I know a lot of people who love binging series one right after another. I'm kind of on the fence of whether I like doing that myself, because I have binged some series in the past. I actually have a bunch of reading vlogs where I binged a lot of trilogies and stuff. And on the one hand, I like it because you're completely immersed in the same story, you know, the whole time, and then you're finished with the series. But I'm also the kind of person that likes to space out my enjoyment of a series, so I tend to read like 1 book of a series per month, but that's just like my own personal thing. Also, give yourself permission to go down a rabbit hole, you know, things like readathons, especially the historical romance readathon that happened really recently. I'll link my reading vlog for that up in the cards above. You know, I really allowed myself to go down a historical romance rabbit hole, and it was so much fun. I don't always like to read books of the same genre one right after another, but every now and then I am in the mood for that, and it can be really fun. So I would definitely recommend trying trying that out for yourself. Also, there are some genres that are quicker reads than others, and that's really how I'm able to read at least a book a day. Romance, whether that be adult or YA romances, those are very quick reads for me because, you know, these stories are always about two people falling in love, and most of the time, especially if it's like a contemporary romance, the world around them is very easy to understand. Also, obviously novellas in general, because they're just shorter books, they're going to be quicker reads. This was something that Jen from the book Refuge brought up. Some people like reading multiple books at once in different formats. So I know that, like Jen, for instance, she loves to read a physical book, an ebook, and an audiobook. So 3 separate books at any given time so that she can bounce around between them depending on, let's say, if one book, like the pacing starts to get really slow and she doesn't want to get burnt out or anything like that, then she can bounce to another book. That may be a method that you really enjoy. Also, this kind of goes hand in hand with what I talked about earlier in terms of, you know, listening to an audiobook when you're waiting in line or something like that. You know, always bringing a book with you somewhere, because you never know when you might have a few extra minutes. So even if you're not listening to an audiobook, like even if you're someone who just doesn't like audiobooks for one reason or another, like bring a physical or an ebook with you everywhere you go, because you could be waiting somewhere for, even if it's just like 5 to 10 minutes. Also, some people really like scheduling out their reading time. I know that this works for a lot of people. It's not really for me because, like I said, any free moment that I personally have, I'm always reading. But yeah, like even if it's just like 15 minutes a day. All right, my battery is going to be dying soon, so I need to get through these tips quickly. So one thing to avoid burnout and like getting into reading slumps in general is taking reading breaks when you need them. But what I personally like to do is read a chunk of a book. I don't really have like a set number of pages or a set time limit or anything like that. That does work for some people, that they'll like give themselves 30 minutes to read and then they'll give themselves like a 10-minute break or something like that. I'm kind of more willy-nilly in terms of all of that, but I do like to read a certain chunk of a book and then I'll take about 15 to 20 minutes where maybe I'll watch a YouTube video, booktube videos, maybe stream something because I've got Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, you know, all of those streaming services. I also like to scroll on Twitter and Instagram, you know, social media, things like that. But yeah, whatever method works for you in terms of like taking frequent breaks so that you don't get burnt out, essentially. Then next I have, you know, read different genres so you don't get burnt out. So something that really works for me is that usually every book that I read is a different genre. So right now I'm reading like an adult science fiction, but then the next book that I read might be a romance, and the next book that I read after that might be a high fantasy, you know, things like that. When I mix up genres, I can't get burnt out because there's always something new and different for me to read. Also, making TBRs or just having like a huge pool of books that excites you, it's going to encourage you to pick up those books more. It's going to encourage you to read more. And I also, again, like to create a good mix of genres in terms of the pool of books that I want to read and things like that. Also, getting to know your reading taste. There's a few different ways to do this. Obviously, through reading books, you're gonna find things that you like, tropes that you like, tropes that you don't, genres that you like, genres that you don't. Also, I recommend going off of your TV and movie taste as well. For instance, if you're someone that loves watching superhero movies, you know, Marvel, DC, things like that, okay, then try finding superhero novels or starting with reading comics and graphic novels, manga. You know, along that same vein, if you love watching rom-com movies, try picking up rom-com novels. And you can easily go on YouTube and search rom-com novels or superhero novels to find different recommendations and things like that, because there are a ton of booktubers out there that read a very wide variety of genres. Something else, feel free to DNF a book. Oh my goodness, when I say DNF, I mean do not finish. If you are not enjoying a book, put it down, put it away, pick up something else. Don't get bogged down by something that you're not enjoying. I know that that sounds like common sense, but that is something that I'm just now coming to terms with, is putting down books that I don't like. Also, something else that you may want to try is, if you know that you love a movie or TV show that is based off of a book, try reading that book if you're someone that's really like just now getting into reading for fun. And then last but not least, your reading taste may affect how much you read. If you are someone that only reads a lot of high fantasy, then obviously you're not going to read as many books as I do, because high fantasy books tend to be very long-winded. Whereas for me, I read a variety of genres, but nowadays it's mostly romance, which, like I said earlier in the video, those are very quick and easy for me to get through. So just know that your reading taste definitely affects how much you read, and that's totally fine. Okay guys, so that's going to be it for this video. I hope that you enjoyed. I would love it if you would leave a comment down below with your favorite reading tips. And with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!